Should you buy Crysis 2 in 2022? There is no FPS out there quite like Crysis. Crysis is one of the most unique feeling FPS games to exist, I think. It's nothing like Halo, but shares similarities to Call of Duty and Battlefield while doing something completely different. With the announcement of Crysis 4 actually being developed, I had to go back to Crysis 2, which is my favourite Crysis game. I know that's quite controversial as many people love the first one and Crysis 2 went in a much more linear direction, but there is just something so special about Crysis 2 that just pulls me in and keeps me playing through all of it in one sitting. So let me take you back to March 2011 and find out if Crysis 2 is actually worth it in 2022. 11 years later. It's been 11 years. Crysis 2 is very different from its original. A more saturated colour palette, more linearity in set pieces, along with a much more streamlined story that focuses more on plot rather than actual character development. It's like a Michael Bay film if Michael Bay actually had any heart in his blockbuster films. You'll be playing as Alcatraz after being ambushed by the Ceph, which results in Alcatraz putting on the nanosuit to survive, leading you on an epic, while short journey across a collapsing New York, and it's fantastic. Watching New York collapse is a trope we've seen many times over the years, but not quite like this in a video game. I don't think any game to this day has successfully shown New York collapsing at this scale since Crysis 2. It's a beautiful game with some of the most epic shit I've ever played through. The gameplay is some of the best FPS gameplay you'll experience, especially with the nanosuit. You'll be cloaking to sneak past your enemies, you'll use maximum armor to take a barrage of bullets, laughing while you do it, and then you'll be murdering every alien you come across in any way you see fit. AI can be ruthless at times, but most of the time they are a little confused. It's quite buggy, to be honest with you. But when it works, it's intense. They'll flank, team up, and try to trick you into going into traps, which is pretty awesome. Along with that, there's enemy variety, and while it may not be Halo levels of variety, there's still a lot of variety here. Going from your typical grunts to your giant tank-like creatures that won't let you breathe, to the pingers that take like 5 or 6 rocket launcher hits and can be pretty terrifying on your first playthrough. It's not as terrifying as waking up to Tobey Maguire standing over your bed and whispering, "Now dig on this." Gunplay is fantastic while a little janky. I can't really explain what I don't like about the gunplay. It's a feeling I can't get past no matter how many times I replay Crysis 2. It just feels way too weighty at times. It's an odd complaint, but I can't really put it into words, and it feels a little sluggish, but the gunplay is still fantastic thanks to the weapons. There is a bunch of weapons here that feel great to shoot, from pistols, snipers, shotguns, and some other crazy weapons I won't spoil, but along with that comes the movement, and that is where Crysis 2 really starts to show off its big boy boots. Movement is key to Crysis 2. You're going to be balancing cloak and armor and sprint, running from one piece of cover to the next before a giant skyscraper decides to, today's the day its legs are going to go out and try and crush you. It's exhilarating, man. There is no FPS game out there like Crysis. Now, over the last decade, massive improvements have been made to FPS movement. Games like Titanfall 2 wiped Crysis 2 out in the movement department. Like, it's a no-brainer. And gunplay in general has improved significantly across the industry. So, yeah, if you're planning to play Crysis 2 for the first time, just go in knowing you're playing an older game, so don't let the visuals trick you, because I did have a few moments where I was like, hang on a minute, 2011, you're lying to me, this came out in like 2016 or something, because it looks really good on PC. But yeah, it is an older game. Oh, by the way, Battlefield 2042. Crysis 2 did the customizing gun thing while in gameplay before you, and it was done way better here. Each weapon you get, you can customize on the go, equipping and removing silencers, grenade launchers, extended mags, and sights and scopes. Crysis 2 was really ahead of its time. Level design, while linear, still gives you a few options to tackle enemy encounters, and it makes sure you use every weapon and ability at your disposal, creating some really great moment-to-moment gameplay that keeps you on your toes. Sure, it's not perfect, but for a linear game, it does give you a lot of options compared to games like Call of Duty or Battlefield. Set pieces are great most of the time, but they do take some of the control away from you to get that cinematic impact, but it's never too invasive. But it would be nice to, play through those moments rather than, cut into a cinematic where you can't control anything. I get it, it's a 2011 game, it came out on the Xbox 360, so I'm hoping for Crysis 4, if we do get like big massive set pieces like that, we actually get to play through them rather than being cut off for a cinematic, you know what I mean? Oh, and we just can't forget about the incredible soundtrack as well. It wasn't just Hans Zimmer doing that soundtrack, it was a bunch of composers, and they nailed it. It's epic and beautiful, which sums up Crysis 2 quite nicely. It's phenomenal. You also have a bunch of upgrades you can unlock throughout the game. Now, this was like my, I don't know how many playthroughs I've of this game, so I had a load of saves, so I didn't start a new game. Well, I started a new game, but for some reason all my upgrades carried over. But yeah, you can unlock new upgrades over the course of the game when you're killing the aliens. You have to go over their bodies to pick up this this goo stuff, and it basically upgrades your suit, so you can have different armor effects, different cloaking effects, you can track enemies, that sort of stuff. And while it's not like the most in-depth customization, it's nice to have it. It just adds another feeling of progression to the game. Since it's a linear campaign, a lot of games suffer with that. There's no real progression in gameplay, there's only progression in story like Call of Duty. But here you do have some elements that you can progress towards, you can unlock, and you can do multiple playthroughs to unlock all the abilities. But there's not much to it. Oh, and of course, I can't review the multiplayer because it's not online anymore. I'm not too sure if there's a mod out there like there was for Transformers Fall of Cybertron, but I can't see anything right now. Maybe I just haven't done enough research, but yeah, the multiplayer is offline, so don't buy it for multiplayer. It's done, it's over. EA does not care about Crysis, so you know what I mean. They don't care, so the multiplayer is offline, so I can't review that, unfortunately. Because I actually quite enjoyed it back on the Xbox 360 with my 30 frames per second. If that, it's probably like 20. Now, I think I've spent enough time licking the backside of Crysis 2, so let's talk about some things I didn't like. The story of Crysis 2 is a mess. It focuses on plot while failing to deliver any genuine emotional moments, which does not help with the voiceless protagonist. It makes a lot of scenes feel really robotic and loses any emotional aspects to it. The voice acting, while not the worst, definitely isn't the best and ventures into parody territory at times, and Crysis 2 is incredibly short. You're looking at about 4 to 5 hours of gameplay since it's so linear, and that's it really. That's the only real negatives I have about Crysis 2. Apart from some weird PC issues which I experienced this time around. I had a lot of screen tearing issues this year for some reason, and I couldn't figure out why, so that really bothered me, and I had multiple crashes which I never experienced before. I'm guessing it's something to do with Windows 10 because of how old Crysis 2 is, but you know, it was just an odd experience because it never happened to me before over the last 10 years. But that's genuinely it in terms of negatives. It's a very short game, the AI is a bit of a mess sometimes, and the story is a bit crap. But for a 4 to 5 hour game, I know it's short, it's short, but every moment feels like a lot of care has been put into it. The set pieces feel good, the gunplay feels good, the AI, while a bit dumb, works. You know, it's better than most Call of Duties, better than most Battlefields, better than Halo sometimes. So yeah, I think it's a really good game, even for 2022 standards. In fact, I think it's a lot better than some games that come out today. I know a lot of people have more issues with Crysis 2 than that, but for me, I think it's pretty much a perfect first-person shooter linear campaign. It's just story elements and performances that let it down. I've replayed it so many times and never get bored of it, and while it's short, it's still fantastic throughout the entire runtime, and not a lot of games can say that. I absolutely think you should buy Crysis 2 in 2022. I really don't think you'll regret it, and remember to keep it classic.